Not change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. Before we commence the meeting, I would like to welcome our newly elected councillors, Councillor Bobby Rigby and Councillor Karen Harrison, to their first well, it isn't Bobby's first council meeting, but first council meeting this time. So you're very welcome. Agenda item 1, declarations of interest. Do any members have any personal or prejudicial interests to declare? Where do we start? Could we try personal first? Prejudicial?
Ask them to indicate what they are.
Which item?
Right, which item, Councillor Collins?
It's the item on the remuneration for the Leader of the Opposition. It's item 5.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Item 7 concerning the devolution referendum.
Thank you. Councillor, who else was there? Dixon?
Item 15.
15.
The council tax reduction scheme.
Councillor Threlfall?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm the same. Item 15.
Councillor Buckley?
Mr Mayor, is it appropriate to ask as to why on a notice of motion Councillor Taylor would have a prejudicial interest?
It is a matter for Councillor Taylor to determine if he has an interest or not, and he might wish to share with members why he's declared so.
Councillor Taylor?
I just consider that...
Would you like to stand, please? Would you please stand?
Sorry. I think that item 7 is a matter which is of interest to every councillor in Lancashire. Thank you.
Okay, any more?
Councillor Bamford.
Oh, Councillor Bamford, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, if you're really interested in any of the council tax reduction scheme, 2025-2026.
Thank you. Any more? Councillor, Pittman.
Thank you. It's also item 15, the council tax reduction scheme.
Councillor Kirkham. Councillor Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Same as everyone else on item 15. Thank you.
Was there anyone else? No. Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, confirmation of minutes. I would like to propose that the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of October be confirmed as a correct record.
I would like to second that, Mr Mayor.
Are we all agreed? All in favour? Thank you. Carried. Agenda item 3, the Mayor's announcements. I'd like to thank everyone who has helped with my fundraising events, especially Joe Collins and the custodians. Thank you also to Alderman Elaine Silverwood and councillors Gail Goodman JP, Frank Andrews and Martin Evans for their generous donations. We will be having an Out of Africa night at the Town Hall on the Thursday the 23rd of January. I would just like to point out an error that was made at the previous full council meeting that was recorded and is available to the public. It was stated that the Mayor invites guests to the Lytham Festival. In fact, it is the council that issues the invitations. Thank you. Agenda item 4.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have no communications this evening.
Agenda item 5, questions from members of the public. No questions have been received from members of the public. Agenda item 6, questions from members of the council. 2 questions have been received from members of the council, and the first question is from Councillor Peter Collins. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Given that Fylde Council has had its economic development strategy 12, where it committed to ensuring that the economic opportunities created by government energy policy are maximised in the Fylde, and given that in December 2022, as chair of the Blackpool Fylde and Wyre Economic Prosperity Board, the leader hosted a presentation by developers about their Morgan and Morecambe offshore wind energy proposals. Can the leader and lead member for corporate and economic development explain what she has done to date to maximise the economic opportunities of the Morgan and Morecambe proposals for Fylde's residents?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I welcome the opportunity to state the Council's position relating to the transmission project for the Morecambe and Morgan wind farm. The planning application is made to the Planning Inspectorate and not to Fylde Council or even Lancashire County Council. We are a consultee. It will ultimately be determined at government level. During the pre-application consultation phase, Fylde Council made representations, pointing out flaws in the site selection process as being against plan policy, infringing greenbelt and areas of separation between town and village, a lack of assessment of the spatial impact of the substations on the openness of the greenbelt, damage to the development potential of our local plan, thus having a negative impact on economic growth, potential impacts from electromagnetic fields, adverse impact on agricultural holdings and the rural economy, the negative visual impact of large substation structures on the wider landscape, particularly in the rural area, noise impact on the community, both during construction phase and afterwards, particularly in the rural area, cumulative impact on the local landscape owing to other development commitments in the countryside, such as large-scale solar farms. For all these reasons, the Council objected to the development and has most recently objected also to the adequacy of the consultation. The question asks about economic benefits, but I think it is important, first of all, to recognise these harms to Fylde and Fylde residents, particularly to those who make a living from the land that will be affected. I recognise too that the Labour government are zealous about green energy projects and about relaxing planning controls, and are therefore paving the way to dismiss local community voices and concerns. This month, Sir Keir Starmer announced that he was going to fast-track 150 infrastructure projects, and on that list he included grid connections and wind farms, saying, "We will send a very clear message to the NIMBYs, the regulators, the blockers, the bureaucrats, the alliance of naysayers. We say to them, you no longer have the upper hand." And so, in light of the clear message from the Labour government that the concerns of local people do not matter, a marker has been put down to do what we can to extract economic and community benefits. For example, and these are only examples, provision of cheaper energy, whether to the community or to schools, or new provision of community facilities, should this application be approved. Those discussions will be had at the appropriate time, but I would not want anyone to think our aim was purely a profit-seeking exercise, because it is clearly not. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I do, Mr. Mayor. The economic opportunities have not been maximised, and the adverse impacts on our communities, environments, and our existing farming, leisure and transport interests have not been avoided. I also note that the Planning Inspectorate effectively dismissed Fylde Council's concerns about the adequacy of consultation regarding the Morgan and Morecambe transmission assets application out of hand, as Fylde's comments were evidently considered inadequate. So what is the leader and Fylde Council now doing that will ensure that adequate expertise and talent is deployed to ensure that Fylde's residents are not going to be the subject of the adverse impacts they have already identified arising from the Morgan and Morecambe transmission assets development?
Yes, I'm very happy to respond, Mr. Mayor, and as the opposition leader knows, we have appointed a planning consultant to do just that, to assist Fylde, its members, its community in making those representations on this planning application, which is of such great concern. And just to reiterate that our approach at Fylde is firstly to make representations against proposals that cause harm to the environment and the community in terms of material planning matters. Secondly, to put forward mitigation measures where they exist. And thirdly, to seek community benefits, including economic benefits. Thank you.
We'll now move on to the second question from Councillor William Taylor. Would you kindly put your question, please?
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to point out there is a small but significant typo error in it, where planes has been misspelt as P-L-A-N-E-S, and of course should read P-L-A-I-N-S. I will now read the question. The Council recently commissioned BDP to produce a climate change strategy. In November, they presented to members the likely impact of climate change for Fylde, including a significant rise in sea levels. In 2023, warming was already at 1.3 Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Several key nations now intend to pull back from tackling climate change. BDP's presentation is clear that a rise in warming to 1.8 Celsius would mean a rise in sea levels, which would put the coastal and flat plains of Fylde at risk. A possible 2.5 degrees Celsius would be devastating for the area, with large tracts of Fylde land at risk of being submerged. Over 40,000 people in Fylde, including their homes, businesses and farms, are barely above the current sea level. There is a clear risk to the majority of our residents. Fylde Council cannot prevent climate change alone, and I know we are taking steps to meet our legal requirements. However, given the acute danger, will the Environment Lead member now consider taking further moderate steps, including hiring a climate change officer, to try to protect Fylde from this imminent threat? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Threlfall, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Taylor. The national and international concerns over climate change are real, and Fylde is seeking to do whatever it can within our remit to tackle the causes of climate change. An external independent consultant has been commissioned to develop the climate change strategy you refer to in your question. The proposed climate change strategy for file will be put before this council in the new year. Based on independent research, the strategy will include recommendations for the council to consider. Any decision on the actions or resources the council should dedicate to addressing climate change will be made by the council. This may include a dedicated post or posts to deliver the strategy at Filed. I look forward to the final draft of the strategy with the recommendations from the specialist consultants coming before this council for approval. It would not be appropriate to preempt the recommendations, but I do share your concerns regarding climate change. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, yes, I know. Councillor Taylor, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Thomas Southall, Councillor Southall, for that very interesting response, and I appreciate that you are taking steps in relation to this really urgent and critical matter. I just want to ask, have you considered the suggestions that were made in the slides regarding the presentation that took place a few weeks ago? And if you have considered those, are you going to actually implement any of those ideas? Thank you.
Councillor Threlfall, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we will respond to, after this independent research strategy will be put before us, and obviously going forward will be met by council decision here in this chamber.
Agenda item number 7, notice of motion, local government reorganisation. I invite Councillor Karen Buckley to introduce this notice of motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll read out the notice of motion, and then if I may, I'll briefly talk to it. Government devolution to Lancashire has been in discussion for at least a decade, in fact a lot longer. A level 2 devolution deal without a mayor has been agreed with government by the upper tier authorities Lancashire, Blackpool and Blackburn with Darwen, which will devolve responsibility for transport and adult education to a combined county authority for Lancashire, together with capital funding for projects. Since the general election on the 4th of July this year, uncertainty has been created by calls to unravel the present devolution deal, to do away with district councils in favour of large unitaries and impose a mayor. The anticipated government white paper on devolution is expected to include proposals along these lines, and indeed, Mr. Mayor, the white paper has been announced today and does so. This council, number 1, notes that the regulations establishing a CCA were laid before Parliament on the 26th of November 24, and such regulations implement the devolution agreement confirmed by the government on the 19th of September 24. 2. Notes that the letter from the Minister of State for Local Government and Devolution, Jim McMahon MP, to all district council leaders in Lancashire of the 26th of November welcomes the formal involvement of the district councils with the CCA as a mechanism to ensure benefits are felt by local communities. 3. Welcomes the devolution deal and seeks to use its influence on the CCA for the betterment of Fylde and its residents. 4. Opposes further local government reorganisation in Lancashire that would lead to the dismantling of the two-tier system of local government in favour of unitary councils as being a distraction from delivering devolution and would have a negative effect on delivering our services and ambitions for Fylde. In summary, unitary councils would not be in the interests of Fylde residents. 5. Resolves to hold a referendum to gauge local opinion should the government pursue an agenda of local government reorganisation, particularly bearing in mind that the imposition of such wholesale change flies in the face of a commitment to devolve government from Whitehall to local communities. The style of referendum and questions shall be set by the council at a later date. 6. Requests the Chief Executive Officer to write to the Minister of State for Local Government and Devolution and all Lancashire authorities to outline the decision made by full council. Mr Mayor, there are 21 county councils in England and 164 district councils. In Lancashire, there are 12 district councils, one upper tier Lancashire County Council and 2 unitaries, Blackpool and Blackburn with Darwin. Within these different tiers and ways of organising local government, the councils have distinct functions, with district councils delivering services such as waste collections, planning, housing, licensing, and the county council being responsible for functions such as highways, adult social care and education. Fylde Council consistently achieves high customer satisfaction, boasts award-winning parks and gardens, hosts events that attract visitors from far and wide, and maintains a strong connection with the community it serves. The staff take well-deserved pride in being part of an organisation that ensured no bin rounds were missed during the COVID pandemic. As expected, today has seen the launch of the government's white paper on devolution, setting out their goal to merge councils together to form larger organisations covering larger geographical areas. This sets decision-making about local services further away from local people, imposing an elected mayor over Lancashire who could be handed powers over planning and infrastructure. What would this mean for Fylde? Let's examine the proposals that have already been put to government. The newly elected Labour MP for Burnley, Oliver Ryan, fresh from his 9 years of being a Tameside councillor, proposes that Fylde is joined with Blackpool, Wyre and Lancaster, or, alternatively, is joined with Preston, Ribble Valley and Pendle, covering the whole breadth of the county. The leaders of Chorley and South Ribble councils, Alistair Bradley and Jackie Alty respectively, have submitted a proposal to government putting them together with West Lancashire. They do not want to be joined with Preston. Matthew Brown, the leader of Preston Council, suggests a land grab of parts of surrounding boroughs to form a Greater Preston. Councillor Sam Chapman-Allen, who is the chairman of the District Councils Network, said, "The network believes that wholesale reorganisation of local government is the last thing the country and our local communities need. It would be a huge distraction that would risk paralysing the delivery of local services in large parts of the country for the rest of the Parliament." Interestingly, in terms of council tax, Fylde charges less for a Band D property than Preston or Blackpool. And let's not forget that an elected mayor would also add a further cost on the council tax bill. In summary, abolishing district councils in favour of reorganisation would jeopardise the democratic accountability, service quality and community focus that these councils provide. Instead of dismantling a system that works effectively at a local level, efforts should be directed towards improving collaboration between different tiers of government while preserving the vital role of district councils. Local government should remain local, close to the people it serves and reflective of their unique needs and priorities. I urge Council to resist this change and support the notice of motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Do you have a second, Councillor Buckley?
Yes, I'd like to stand, Mr Mayor, to second the motion. And can I speak at this same time, please?
You can.
Colleagues, members, we have just spent almost a decade disagreeing, haggling, hesitating, and finally agreeing only 3 months ago, a level 2 non-mayoral devolution deal for Lancashire. We have come up with a plan for the future which has been supported in principle by the last government and endorsed by the present Labour administration with some caveats. And a group of Labour MPs have been pushing for proposals to reduce the number of councils from perhaps 15 to 3 or 4 with an Andy Burnham style mayor, very different to the structure agreed. We have had the white paper published today, and from very, very brief oversight of it, I think we should be very concerned. But any changes as significant as these should be subject to local referenda. Now is not the right time to destroy a local government structure that has served Lancashire for 50 years. There are now fears that smaller councils, that is district councils, could be abolished or certainly have their powers to deliver for local communities that they know and understand severely diminished. If these proposals, I talk about the imminent government devolution white paper, but the one that has now been published, if these proposals are carried forward, they will certainly undermine the progress already made on the existing devolution deal. And in my opinion, this would prove to be a major, unnecessary distraction. What we should be doing is concentrating on consolidating the work put into the devolution deal already agreed by Lancashire authorities and ensuring it delivers for our local communities. What emerges from the white paper will probably put at risk what has been achieved with the Level 2 deal by sponsoring a form of unitarisation, that is the creation of a smaller number of standalone local authorities. These will seek to represent vast and diverse parts of Lancashire and replace the county and district model currently able to reflect that diversity. New proposals at this stage not only confuse councillors, but I'm sure the wider public, who I suspect watch with some dismay as we approach another extended period of wrangling after appearing to have achieved a consensus for the way forward in reorganising local government. Members, what we need at the moment is stability, and the agreed devolution deal structure proposed and agreed locally in Lancashire should be progressed. If the government are now proposing, which it appears to be the case, something quite different, then surely there has to be a referendum seeking the views of local people rather than accept a centrally driven, imposed system from government with no obvious public mandate. The Level 2 deal, already agreed, involving the establishment of a new Lancashire Combined County Authority, which would oversee the powers being devolved from government, is an acceptance that change was needed in our local government structure. Nobody denies that. It is not, however, the case that we have been resistant to change, only that the changes should be an appropriate response to the challenges of a world where clearly bids for government funding appear to be more powerful, emerging from larger economic units. Fylde can seek to, I quote, use its influence on the CCA for the betterment of Fylde and its residents. Unitary councils and the dismantling of the two-tier system will not, in my opinion, serve the interests and ambitions of Fylde citizens. Without a referendum, government plans contradict The very notion of devolving power to the regions and Fylde needs to communicate with the Minister of State for Local Government and Devolution and Lancashire authorities the messages being expressed here tonight, that pursuing further revised devolution deals when one has already been agreed locally cannot and should not be supported. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hayhurst.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm in my 46th year as a councillor, and this is the biggest threat to the quality of life to the people of Fylde that there's ever been in those 46 years. 2 years ago, I made a speech about being twinned with Chernobyl, and which was obviously my reference to Blackpool. And I'm afraid that it's come to fruition. It looks like it's been coming to fruition. Let's face it, the idea of Pendle, Preston, Ribble Valley together with Fylde is absolute nonsense. We might as well go with the moon. We have nothing in common with those areas. But equally, we have nothing in common with Blackpool, neither. What we would be expected to do if this goes through is to take on Blackpool's debts and Blackpool's deprivation. And I've got to say that it's Blackpool Labour Council seems to think it's a done deal, because they're buying everything in Blackpool at the moment, which is making a loss. Places like the Tower, the Winter Gardens and everything, and Blackpool is a very sick place as far as its economic history. So I've got to say, we've got to go with this, and what I would like to do is to have a referendum anyway. Why can't we in Fylde decide to have a referendum and see what people in Fylde want, out with asking the government for a referendum? I know what the view would be. It would be 100% virtually against the idea of going with Blackpool. We've talked tonight about green spaces and farming. It'll all disappear if Blackpool comes in, because all we're going to do is we're going to be bringing Blackpool into Fylde, into the green areas that we've got and we all love in our area. Our quality of life will be a disaster if this goes through. We've got to do everything possible to fight it. And if not, if we're not going to fight it, let us go and buy everything up and let us get into debt and let Blackpool help to pay for our debt, because that's what Blackpool's expecting us to do. I've got to say, this is an absolute terrible day for this community. And I fully support what the leader has proposed tonight. We have got to fight tooth and nail to keep out of Blackpool.
Councillor Fazakerley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I rise to support the Leader's Notice of Motion wholeheartedly. As those members of a certain longevity on this council may remember, when I was leader of Fylde Council from 2014 until 2020, discussions were ongoing for several years regarding the formation of a Lancashire Combined Authority. I spent many a long afternoon at County Hall whilst the pros and cons of the various proposals of how this could be achieved were debated. As you can imagine, in a meeting involving representatives of the various political groups from both the unitary and district authorities, these lengthy discussions covered a multitude of suggestions as to how such a reorganisation could be achieved, and a wide range of options and opinions were aired. However, the one issue upon which we were all agreed was that of having a combined authority mayor. It was a dead duck floating right across the political pond. There was also precious little support for dismantling the two-tier system. I would, therefore, Mr. Mayor, urge all colleagues this evening to support Councillor Buckley's notice of motion. Thank you.
Councillor Withers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Farnborough Council is a remarkably successful council. I've been a member for 5.5 years, and my admiration for the organisation has grown year by year. It is extremely professionally and efficiently managed, and when surveys of our residents are carried out from time to time, the levels of satisfaction expressed are highly gratifying. This, of course, was manifested at the local election last year when a Conservative-led council was once again elected. Since then, there have been 2 by-elections, both of which have seen Conservative victories. If residents were dissatisfied with the council, this would not have been the case. We remain one of only 2 councils out of circa 450 in the country to be debt-free. That is a considerable achievement and a testament to the stringent financial controls exercised by the CFO and his team. While councils are failing and going bust all over the country, Fylde remains a shining beacon of light in an increasingly gloomy national picture. Why then are we being forced into a situation that we, and I suspect our residents, don't want? What is it hoped will be gained by reversing devolution in this way? It's a complete betrayal of what this hapless, unprincipled and incompetent government promised. The suspicion is that envious neighbouring councils look greedily at our finances and lick their wolfish lips. They want to ravage our bank accounts for their own profligate purposes. Blackpool, one of the councils it is suggested we might be merged with, pays a staggering £24 million a year to service its debts. This is more than double our entire annual expenditure. Why should a prudent authority such as ours have to contribute to costs brought about by such blatant profligacy and mismanagement? It's like being forced to bail out your neighbour who's fallen behind with his mortgage. Does anyone in this chamber believe that the governance of Fylde would be improved by this? Does anyone believe that the interests of our residents are being taken into account by the proponents of this misguided, ideologically conceived policy? Does anyone believe that a monolithic, overarching, unitary authority will run Fylde better than Fylde Borough Council? We can just about accept the institution of a combined county authority, as laid before Parliament on the 26th of November, not even 3 weeks ago. But this far and no further. As the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'll conclude, Mr. Mayor, with 3 words. Resist, resist, resist. Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unlike some of the members on the opposite side of the chamber, I don't have a prepared speech. When I saw the notice of motion, I did email the leader and said I'd be quite happy to second it. I think for once we've got a consensus of opinion across this chamber. I agree almost entirely, apart from Councillor Withers' party political broadcast speech. But with the comments of Councillor Hayes and Councillor Redcliffe and the leader, I think it has the full support of this chamber. The one thing was one of the recommendations. I mean, we could ask the Chief Executive to write to other councils and ask them to have a referendum as well. And it's just a minor point. I don't know if the leader's agreeable to that. But, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's within the last reorganisation was some 60 years ago, full reorganisation, when Lancashire included Liverpool and Manchester cities within Lancashire County Council. And the subsequent reorganisation was because big is not beautiful. And what we're seeing here is what happened as well to the National Health Service, which had a number of smaller national health units dotted around, which were all brought together under one overweening massive organisation, and the efficiency of which went down considerably. I cannot see the point in making larger organisations. Surely we have already debated this, as Councillor Fazackley has said, time and time and time again and come up with something that we all agreed on. And it's not easy in Lancashire to agree. Blackpool and Darwin, for example, don't ever agree with Lancashire and vice versa, and they go around in circles. But we surely, with this notice of motion, we should also, and I take Chancellor Peter Collins on this as well, should be talking to the other councils, some of which, for political reasons, I believe, want to see the Burnham solution. And what sort of solution is it anyway? It doesn't always work. So I'm very much in favour of this notice of motion and will support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Buckley, do you wish to sum up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the support across the chamber. And just to assure colleagues that I am certainly talking to other district leaders across Lancashire, but there are varied responses. But certainly my Conservative colleagues and I are at one on this. And it is really good to have that cross-party support, and I think it would give a really strong message if we did have that unanimous support across this chamber. So in that respect, Mr. Mayor, may I ask for a recorded vote? Thank you.
You have the required number of people? You do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will read out each councillor in turn. If you're supporting the motion, please indicate for. If you're against, indicate against. And you have the option to abstain. Councillor Frank Andrews. For. Councillor Peter Anthony. For. Councillor Liz Bickerstaff. For. Councillor Damien Buckley. For. Councillor Karen Buckley. For. Councillor Edward Collins. For. Councillor Peter Collins. For. Councillor Chris Dixon. For. Councillor Martin Evans. For. Kelly's not here, is he? Councillor Susan Fazackerley. For. Councillor Ellie Gaunt. For. Councillor Gail Goodman. For. Noreen's not here. Councillor Gavin Harrison. For. Councillor Karen Harrison. For. Councillor Paul Hayhurst. For. Councillor Paul Hodgson. For. Councillor John Kirkham. For. Councillor Matthew Lee. For. Councillor Cheryl Little. For. Councillor Michelle Morris. For. Councillor Ed Nash. For. Councillor Jane Nixon. For. Councillor Sandra Pittman. For. Councillor Richard Redcliffe. For. Councillor Andrew Redfern. For. Councillor Bobby Rigby. For. Councillor Vince Settle. For. Councillor William Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Tommy Threlfall.
For.
Councillor Viv Wilder.
For.
Councillor Michael Withers.
For.
Deputy Mayor Councillor Joanne Gardner.
Abstain.
And Mayor Councillor Karen Henshaw.
For.
Tracy will total it for us.
30. So, 30 in favour and 2 abstentions, and we had 4 absences, so it's carried.
Okay, so we have 31 for and 2 abstentions, so that's clearly carried.
Now we move to agenda item number 8, invitation to accept appointment of the Deputy Mayor 2025-26. I invite Councillor Andrews to propose this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In 2010, that's over 14 years ago, I became a councillor, and Councillor Little was the first person I've met and has been a positive influence through many changes of council. In more recent years, I've watched her enthusiasm and her ability to raise funds for the Royal British Legion. So I don't think there's anyone else I'd rather have as my deputy mayor. So I propose Councillor Cheryl Little.
you have a second?
I have a seconder, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be delighted to second this. I know firsthand how Councillor Cheryl Little is committed and dedicated herself to the role when she was mayor, in 23-24. She will bring enthusiasm, passion and commitment to this role of deputy mayor during the 25-26 season. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak on the item? Then we will take the vote. All in favour? Unanimous? Any abstentions? No. One abstention. At this point, we would like to move agenda item 16 to the next item. Agenda item 16. Right. Agenda item 16, Executive Scrutiny Protocol. I invite Councillor Fazakerley to propose this item.
Thank you. That the Council approves this item forthwith. This protocol has been produced as a result of statutory guidance and outlines the relationship between the Executive and the Scrutiny Committees, particularly with regard to effective collaboration and transparency. The draft protocol was recently reviewed and approved by the LGA Peer Challenge team, and it was subsequently endorsed by the Audit and Governance Committee and recommended to full Council for approval. Mr. Mayor, Councillor Ellie Gaunt, Chairman of the Internal Affairs Scrutiny Committee, will second the approval of this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second the item and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anyone wish to speak to the item? Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I accept the protocol, but I don't think it goes quite far enough. I think it's good practice if the chairs of the scrutiny committees go to the opposition. This council has supposedly had a policy of continuous improvement for the past 20 years, and I think if we were to do this, we would have better scrutiny overall if I went to the chairs went to the opposition parties. I'm not going to propose it because it will be all voted down, I accept that, but once again I make the point, and no doubt I'll be making the same point again in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else? We will now take the vote. Oh, sorry. No, she had. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't need to add anything. Thank you.
I didn't think she did. Right, we'll now take the vote. Those in favour? Against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That's carried. We'll now move back to item 9, which has now become item 10. Adjustment to committee allocations. I invite Councillor Karen Buckley to propose this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I also add my congratulations to Councillors Bobby Rigby and Karen Harrison on their success at the recent by-elections in Wharton and Kilgrimmel, respectively. Welcome to both of them to elected office on Fylde Council. The political balance of the council has changed as a result of these by-election wins and is now as follows. There are 21 Conservatives, a gain of 2 seats. There are 9 independents, a loss of 2 seats. There are 2 Labour, 2 Liberal Democrats and 3 non-aligned councillors. And so the change in political balance has had an effect on the allocation of seats to committees, and these have been set out in the report before you at paragraph 3 and in the table. Thank you to the Leader of the Opposition for putting forward the changes from his side of the Council, and I will incorporate them in the proposal. As it says in paragraph 3, the changes to political balance mean that 1 seat on the Executive Committee will transfer from the Independent Group to the Labour Group, and that will be from Councillor Peter Collins coming off and Councillor Bill Taylor coming on. From 1 seat on the Planning Committee will transfer from the Independent Group to the Liberal Democrat Group, and that will be Councillor Peter Collins coming off and Councillor Joanne Gardner going on. And 1 seat on the Chief Officer Employment Committee will transfer from the Independent Group to a non-aligned councillor, and that will be Councillor Liz Bickerstaff coming off and Councillor Matthew Lee coming on. But all in all, if I may set out the revised recommendation, which has been put on people's desks, and it includes the new appointees and a change to the Vice Chairman of Community Focused Scrutiny Committee. And I'll read these out. So the revised recommendation for the seats are that Councillor Karen Harrison be appointed as a member of Internal Affairs Scrutiny Committee in place of Councillor Redcliffe. Councillor Martin Evans is appointed as Vice Chairman of Community Focused Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Frank Andrews comes off Community Focused Scrutiny Committee, and Councillor Bobby Rigby is appointed to that same committee. Councillor William Taylor be appointed to the Executive Committee, and Councillor Jordan Ledger to the Internal Affairs Scrutiny Committee in place of Councillor Taylor. That Councillor Joanne Gardner be appointed to the Planning Committee, and Councillor Peter Collins be a named planning substitute member. That the Liberal Democrats continue to nominate their seat on the Executive Committee to Councillor Kelly Farrington. That Councillor Paul Hayhurst be appointed as a member of the Executive Committee in place of Councillor Peter Collins. That Councillor Peter Collins be appointed to the Internal Affairs Scrutiny Committee in place of Councillor Kelly Farrington. That Councillor Liz Bickerstaff comes off the Chief Officer Employment Committee, and she is replaced by Councillor Matthew Lee being appointed to that same committee. I think I've covered all of the changes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well done.
Councillor Redcliffe, will you?
I'd like to second the recommendations. I think the appropriate adjustments have been made.
Thank you. We'll now take the vote. Oh, sorry, does anyone wish to speak? No, we'll now take the vote. All in favour? Thank you. It's carried. Agenda item 11, which was 10, fully funded in-year addition to capital programme, Future High Street Fund, Kirkham. I invite Councillor Buckley to propose this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On conclusion of the public realm scheme in Kirkham, the Council is asked to approve an in-year increase to the capital programme fully funded from the remaining Lancashire County Council grant allocation of £425,000. This marks the end of the public realm phase in Kirkham, and I'd like to thank the work of the new Regen team, the support from Kirkham Town Council and the project board, which includes councillors Paul Hodgson, Richard Redcliffe and the Mayor of Kirkham, Chris Hopkinson. Work in Kirkham continues with the shopfront improvement scheme, the restoration of the hillside and the conversion of the former TSB bank to a restaurant, all of which will continue to add improvements to the historic market town of Kirkham in the heart of rural Fylde. I move the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Threlfall will second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I stand to second this item.
Does anyone wish to speak to this item? No? We'll take the vote. Those in favour? carried. Thank you very much. Agenda item 11, Members' Allowance Scheme. I invite Councillor Settle to propose this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You will see in these submitted papers that the Independent Remuneration Panel have recommended that the Council considers providing the leader of the main opposition group with a special responsibility allowance. This is shown in recommendations 1 and 2. We support these recommendations and I therefore propose acceptance of these, and I have a seconder in Councillor Nixon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I stand to second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Does anyone wish to speak to this item? No? Then we will take the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. You can tell Councillor Collins he can come back.
Thanks, Paul. Got a job for him.
Where's he gone? Where's he gone? He'll be drinking what we've left in the reception room. You've lost him. Oh, never mind. We'll carry on. Agenda item 12, medium-term financial strategy, financial forecast update, including revenue, capital and treasury management, 2024-25 and 2028-29. I invite Councillor Settle to propose this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The MTFS is designed to give us a 5-year forward view of our financial situation based on all available information to date. The government's finance settlement figures are not due out until next week, but based on our current data, plus a 21-page general policy statement we received last week from them, we have provided our best forward view. And in summary, that is contained in Appendix E within your papers. As you can imagine, some statements in their letter are quite reassuring, such as a commitment to a 3.2% increase in core spending power. But some are a little worrying, such as the intention to wrap up previous ring-fence grants into the overall core spending calculation. We shall have to wait for our own spending allocation next week to see whether we have to make any adjustments in future. Other areas also have reassuring statements, for example that the new homes bonus and the special pooling arrangements for business rates will continue next year. More worrying is the intention to fundamentally rethink both of these the year after. Mention is also made throughout the letter to the objective of, and I quote, targeting money towards areas with the greatest need for services based on deprivation, unquote. Whether FILD qualifies here is up to them. Nonetheless, our financial position is robust as always, and you can see elsewhere in the papers that we are still investing in many capital schemes to improve the borough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I have a seconder in Councillor Dixon.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to second and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? No. We will now take the vote. Those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Agenda item 13, mid-year prudential indicators and Treasury Management Monitoring Report 2024-25. I invite Councillor Withers to propose this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Audit and Governance Committee considered the mid-year prudential indicators and Treasury Management Monitoring Report, big mouthful, at its meeting last month and recommends that Council notes the report and approves the prudential indicators and the investment limits as shown at Appendix B of this report. I'm pleased to propose this item, Mr Mayor, and I have a seconder in Councillor Redfern.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to second it.
Does anyone wish to speak to this item? We'll take the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Right. Agenda item 14, proposed fees and charges 2025-26. I invite Councillor Settle to propose this item.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Me again. Fees and charges. Each year we consider our fees and charges for the forthcoming year, and our proposals for these are shown in Appendix A of your papers. Some of these are statutory and subject to government rules, and some are based on what we consider are reasonable prices, where we also look at similar activities in nearby areas. I propose that we accept these fees and charges, and I have a seconder in Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to second this item and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak to this item? Then we'll take the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Agenda item 15, Council Tax Reduction Scheme 2025-26, and I understand several councillors would have declared interest in this item. I've got a throat thing. Do you want a throat thing? Very good. Okay. This item was down as to follow and was circulated to all members on the 9th of December. I invite Councillor Settle to propose this item.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This item comes before the Council each year for reconsideration and is there to provide low-income households with some financial assistance to pay their council tax. Since its inception, around 10 years ago, we have adopted the policy of it being self-financing, in that we receive a central government grant for a set amount, and based on anticipated take-up, we can offer a discount of 22.7% per eligible household. We also offer discretionary amounts in excess of this for households in extreme difficulties. I propose acceptance of this scheme as per the recommendations, and I have a seconder in Councillor Gavin Harrison. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I stand to second the recommendation, reserve the right to speak, although on tonight's track record it's unlikely to be needed.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Does anyone yet wish to speak on this item? No. We'll take the vote. Those in favour? Thank you, that's carried.